persecution of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. Siobhan MacDonald to move.
For it is in Pakistan that the world's largest Ahmadi community exists, with an estimated 4 million members. And it is there that perhaps the persecution that Ahmadis face can be most prominently found. Only this morning, I have awoken to terrifying reports of an Ahmadi house and mosque attacked by extremists in Sikalot last night, with mob leaders calling for this to happen to all Ahmadi mosques. The situation could not be more precarious. For an Ahmadi in Pakistan faces widespread hatred from the moment that they are born to the moment that they die. Perpetrators are given free rein to attack innocent Ahmadis in the knowledge that they will never face prosecution for their actions. To understand why, we need to revert back 44 years into 1974, when Prime Minister Bhutto amended the Pakistan constitution to declare Ahmadis as non-Muslim for the purpose of law. 10 years later, under General Zia, the government of Pakistan made it a criminal offence for Ahmadis to call themselves Muslim, refer to their faith as Islam, call their place of worship a mosque, make the call for prayers, say the Islamic greeting, or propagate their faith. The constitutional right of freedom of religion that is enshrined in Pakistan's constitution is therefore completely violated, with an Ahmadi liable to arrest, 3 years imprisonment and an unlimited fine if they are considered to be behaving as a Muslim.
That it's somewhat ironic that, as far as I'm aware, it is perfectly in order for me or for her to say Assalamu alaikum as a greeting, whereas in Pakistan it's not in order for an Ahmadi Muslim to do that.
It does seem extraordinary that the persecuted Christian community could do some of the things and act in a way that the Ahmadis themselves couldn't. So there's a real conflict going on there. The statistical persecution against Ahmadis in Pakistan, 260 Ahmadis have been killed, 379 have been assaulted for their faith, 27 Ahmadi mosques have been demolished, and 22 have been set on fire or damaged. 39 Ahmadi bodies have been exhumed after burial, and 66 Ahmadis have even been denied a burial in a common cemetery, and all in a country with a constitutional right to freedom of religion. Ahmadis in Pakistan live in constant fear that a baseless accusation will be made against them, with the consequences so often proving life-threatening. The persecution is faced from cradle to grave, but the discrimination in its education takes many forms, from nationalising all Ahmadi Muslim schools, expelling Ahmadi students based on their faith, or even the editing out of any Ahmadi Muslims contributing to Pakistan's history. Take Professor Abdus Salam, a groundbreaking scientist famous for the work in the field of physics, which awarded him the first Nobel Prize in Pakistan's history. His faith has led to him being erased from the textbooks. These same textbooks may, I remind the Chamber, are rife with biases against religious minorities. Back to Pakistan, where an Ahmadi student may not even make it through education. In 2008, all Ahmadi students were expelled from a medical college in Faisalabad on the basis of their faith, whilst a local newspaper printed the headline, "We shall not allow admission in Rawalpindi Medical College of any student guilty of blasphemy." For these young Ahmadis, their education and their religion cannot coexist side by side. Upon leaving education, discrimination and persecution continues for Ahmadis in Pakistan when it comes to applying for a job. For even the rumour that somebody may be an Ahmadi can destroy their opportunity of employment. For example, the civil and military services have placed restrictions on Ahmadis progressing in senior ranks. Outside of work and education, the persecution of an Ahmadi in Pakistan is allowed to flourish in wider society. For when an Ahmadi applies for a passport, they must state their religion by law. Anyone who self-identifies as a Muslim is required to take an oath declaring Ahmadis as non-Muslim. The reality, therefore, is that no Ahmadi can go to Mecca to perform the Hajj, one of the 5 sacred pillars of Islam. Nowhere else in the world are Muslims required to take such a declaration, And for an Ahmadi in Pakistan, their persecution continues when they come to vote. For an Ahmadi is prohibited by law to vote as a Muslim. They must either sign a declaration that they are not an Ahmadi or acquiesce to their status as non-Muslim, with a violation of this requirement punishable with imprisonment. This has effectively denied them the right to vote for nearly 40 years. What's more, the separate electoral list for Ahmadis is published and publicly available, enabling extremists to target, intimidate and harass the community. No wonder they face such persecution. And when legislators proposed reforms within the last year that could have changed this, outrage was sparked across Pakistan, prompting senior political and judicial figures to speak out, coupled with a mass violent rally.
Pakistan uses the state, the constitution, the law to persecute the Ahmadis, and that is unique to their level of persecution. With all the horrors we know in Pakistan, the Ahmadi Muslims are singled out by the state and by the constitution, and that is why we should speak out loudly today.
After facing a life of hatred, the end of the Ahmadis' life in Pakistan does not necessarily mean the end of persecution, for there are countless examples of Ahmadis being denied the right to burial, with the protesting extremists claiming that they have no right to a burial in a Muslim graveyard. Gravestones have been desecrated and vandalised, whilst there have also been incidents of exhumation of deceased bodies. From anti-Ahmadi sermons preached in mosques to posters calling for a boycott of Ahmadi businesses and customers, there is a constant undercurrent of hostility being pushed against the Ahmadi community.
I'd like to start by praising her speech as well, which I felt was not only comprehensive, but shocking in the details that it brought forward in terms of the persecution suffered by the Ahmadiyya community around the world. I think I would draw the House's attention to this excellent report, Ahmadis in Pakistan facing an existential threat. It really does set out quite comprehensively the persecution that happens around the world. And only last night, as she said, a 500-strong mob attacking a mosque that's been there for 100 years in a part of Punjab in Pakistan.
Persecution that they face, particularly in Pakistan, is quite abhorrent. The way that the law in Pakistan, from the constitutional provisions to the penal code, actually allows state persecution is quite shocking and I think quite unique. And what it says to the people of Pakistan, many of the people of Pakistan, who I'm sure in many ways are extremely religious and good people, but by the state actually putting it into their laws, it gives a green light to awful behaviour. And it means that people who persecute, who attack, who indeed even murder Ahmadi Muslims get away with it. They know they are not going to be prosecuted. They know they are not going to be brought to justice. That means the rule of law does not exist for Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan. And that is what is quite atrocious.
Younger people are more anti-Ahmadi in Pakistan than older people. In the West, we always expect the younger to be more liberal. That is not currently the case in Pakistan, and that is very frightening.
I am alarmed that the persecution of the Ahmadis there's almost a degree of acceleration in it. The murders, the assaults, the way that we see even from last night, mosques being attacked. There's a concern there that this is becoming endemic and deep-rooted, particularly through the education, the textbooks that children are seeing. And now, I don't want to go too far along this road, but those of us who have had the privilege with the Holocaust Education Trust to visit Auschwitz and learn about the 8 steps to genocide, some of what is happening to the Ahmadi Muslims does ring awful bells. And while we should not throw away that word too freely, I do think maybe the UN Office for Genocide Prevention needs to do a study. We need to make sure that we're not dealing here with just something that comes and goes, but that maybe something that's could have potentially disastrous outcomes. I mean, if one looks at the UN International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, or the UN International Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, or the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, or the UN Convention on Discrimination in Respect of Employment and Occupation, it's quite difficult to see that Pakistan is abiding by these things that it's signed up for in the international community with respect to Ahmadi Muslims in its own country. But I also think of the Ahmadi Muslim Pakistani people who've fled from Pakistan, who are refugees in refugee camps around the world, and I do not believe we are taking enough of them into this country. I know it's a Home Office issue, but I would ask the Minister if he can confirm that he will go to the Home Office and say, can this country take more Ahmadi Muslims who are sitting in refugee camps, forgotten? Well, let's not forget them. If we're going to take anything from this debate, let's take some small steps that are under our control. And let's revisit the country guidance about how Home Office officials are trained to consider asylum applications for Ahmadi Muslims from Pakistan. Let's make sure that it's properly dealt with so people understand what Ahmadi Muslims are having to put up with in Pakistan. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think already we've heard across the House a united approach that we want to come together and say to the government of Pakistan, this is unacceptable, to Ahmadi Muslims here in the UK and around the world, and particularly Pakistan, that we stand with them. We will campaign for their rights and campaign for their right to have religious freedom and basic human rights, and we will not rest until that happens.
But the Pakistan state, by actually putting it into law, has made this official persecution. You're not allowed to call yourself a Muslim, you can't refer to your faith as Islam, you can't call your place of worship a mosque, you can't preach or propagate the faith. There is deliberate inequality in opportunity for education and indeed for practicing whatever profession you may wish to do. Can I just put into record what Christian Solidarity Worldwide have said in their conclusion to report on persecution of the Ahmadiyya community? That the mood of aggression by certain Islamist groups towards the Ahmadiyya community shows no sign of improvement. Indeed, the Pakistan government has lacked the political will to make any concession to their community. They go on further that the exclusionary nature of politics has steadily grown since the creation of Pakistan, and that is playing an important role in other states in the world. And so, as the Right Honourable Gentleman said, this is an increasing, not a decreasing problem.
We know the Ahmadiyya community is continuing to suffer persecution across the world. And I think there's an important message to send from this House today, that we in Britain are on their side and we seek the safety of Ahmadis in every nation across the world. I think it is important that where we see hatred in this way, which goes against Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as well, which requires states to guarantee the freedom of religion and belief, that we have a way in which we stand together as nations to root out this hatred and to make sure that Ahmadis are free to practice their religion and their faith in every country across the world.
I can go to Pakistan, and as I do when I go to Bangladesh, and say Assalamu alaikum as a mark of respect to my to Bangladeshi friends and people that I'm meeting for the first time. I could go and do that in Pakistan, but unfortunately the Ahmadi community that live there cannot. As we've heard, they can't have a call to prayer, they cannot self-identify as Muslims, and we've seen attacks. We've already heard about the attack on the mosque in Sialkot in Punjab, where the 100-year-old mosque was attacked during the night with a violent mob. The house next door was damaged. Local administrators and police and journalists were all at the site when it was going on, but they were just powerless to do anything. They were helpless to do anything, just to survive spectators, while people were just running around, continuing unabashed with the destruction of the Ahmadiyya property. The last report that I'm aware of that was done in any great length was by the International Human Rights Committee, and a group that specialise in Ahmadiyya affairs. And the forward talked about the systemic nature of their persecution. They're talking about Pakistan's draconian blasphemy laws. Some of the key findings of that report were the fact that anti-terror laws are being used in Pakistan, being misused against Ahmadis and other religious minorities. We've heard about the fact that educational texts promote intolerance and hatred, particularly syllabus for religious education, and that nationalised schools and colleges of Ahmadis have still not been returned to the Ahmadi community in accordance with the Pakistan government's policies. And effectively, the constitutional amendment of 1974, designating Ahmadis as non-Muslims, laid the foundation for many, many years of hardship and persecution for this Muslim sect. And then this just really is now entrenched in Pakistan. So we must make sure that Pakistan does everything it can to tackle the religious zealots within that country, because we've seen in other countries like Saudi Arabia how often government, people, and the religious leaders can often work in different speeds, and we must make sure that we can help them effectively all align to say, although they will fundamentally disagree with the beliefs of the Ahmadiyya Muslims, clearly they're going to do that if they believe that Muhammad is the last prophet and the Ahmadis do not. There is no way you're going to reconcile that, but that does not mean the Ahmadiyya Muslims should not be able to celebrate, worship their religion and live in peace.
The impression we got when we met with the Deputy High Commissioner from Pakistan, there didn't seem to be an acceptance that there was in fact an issue for the community. And we were asked to, having read out some quite detailed evidence, were asked to provide more evidence to demonstrate that there was a problem. Well, I think many members today have referred to the problems that exist in Pakistan, and I think there does need to be a recognition on the part of the Pakistan High Commission here that there is a problem.
The Ahmadiyya community is one of the most persecuted groups of people on earth. And as members will be aware, Pakistan, a country with which I have great and deep familial links and a great love, is tragically at the heart of much of this persecution. Indeed, we heard only last night that a mob of 500 people reported to have attacked a 100-year-old mosque in Punjab. We don't yet know what the cost was in terms of human suffering. In that country, there exists deep structural and institutional prejudice against Ahmadis. And by defining in law that Ahmadis are not Muslims, Pakistan has justified decades of religious persecution against them and denied them anything resembling religious freedom. Those who've killed Ahmadis for their faith are often hailed as heroes. Ahmadi figures from Pakistani culture and history are simply deleted from the school curriculum. And the use of blasphemy laws, as the Honourable Member mentioned in his speech before mine, the use of those laws against Ahmadis can see them imprisoned or even put to death simply for expressing their beliefs. And if anyone is in any doubt, I would recommend that they read a copy of the 2016-2017 report by the Asian Human Rights Commission. It's called Ahmadis in Pakistan Face an Existential Threat. But it's not just Pakistan. In Algeria, Ahmadis have been detained and forced to worship in secret. In Indonesia, a country, by the way, with proud traditions of religious tolerance, government ministers have called for a ban on the Ahmadiyya Muslim faith altogether.
The Ahmadiyya community is the most widely, institutionally and constitutionally persecuted religious group in Pakistan, with Ahmadis facing persistent, systematic violence, structural discrimination, which affects our economic, social and employment status, political life and education activities. It affects every facet of their life. In 2017 alone, at least 4 Ahmadi Muslims were murdered for their beliefs, and since the mid-80s, 260 other Ahmadis have met a similar tragic fate. Pakistan Penal Code is used to prevent Ahmadi Muslims from identifying as Muslims, using Islamic terminology, symbols, preaching, disseminating materials in their faith, or referring to their house of worship as mosques. Any of the above is punishable with 3 years imprisonment and a fine. If the offence is regarded as blasphemy, then an Ahmadi could be sentenced to death. How tragic and how wrong that would be. Ahmadis are also technically prohibited from voting because to do so the state requires them to register as non-Muslims, which many refuse to do. Blasphemy laws in Pakistan are disproportionately and unfairly used to target Ahmadi Muslims and other religious or belief minorities, and since 1984 over 300 Ahmadis have been charged with blasphemy under the Penal Code.
Blasphemy laws are incompatible with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which Pakistan has committed to. At the end of April, Pakistan's Ahmadi community released a report detailing the growing hostilities that the community is facing, including all the different things that we've heard of in this debate: indiscriminate arrests, impediments from voting in general elections, and the various other discriminations that we have heard. In Pakistan, blasphemy against any recognised religion is illegal, with penalties from fine to death, and anyone can file a blasphemy case claiming their religious freedoms are injured for any reason. But then this is what is exactly being applied to the Ahmadi community by their faith not being recognised as a religion. And a blasphemy law by itself then is bad for freedom of speech. And blasphemy laws which then actively ban another religion by name, I think are really quite exceptional and really a matter of serious concern. And then we hear, and we've heard throughout this debate, the impact of that, of killings, of murders, of attacks, of exclusions from schools and from other aspects of civil society. And sadly, this is something that has gone on for decades, dating back to at least the amendments to the Constitution that were made and further. In order to apply for a Pakistani passport, Pakistanis are required to sign a declaration that they consider Mirza Ghulam Ahmad to be an impostor prophet and consider his followers to be non-Muslims. And that is quite an astonishing thing for any holder of a religious belief to be asked. It's not the theological and religious parallels are not identical, but to me it seems it's the equivalent as if I was asked to sign a document not recognising the authority of the Pope within the Catholic Church. And that would just be astonishing. I mean, that, it's very difficult to comprehend. Some of the worst and most concentrated abuse of the Ahmadi is taking place in Pakistan. There is growing persecution around the world. We've heard particularly stark examples from Indonesia, but we know also in Bangladesh and Belarus and various other parts of the world. We see the same kind of thing: people being targeted for their beliefs, people being attacked, people being murdered, and none of that is acceptable and has to be called out. And again, I understand that Ahmadis are in fact officially banned from entering Saudi Arabia and performing the Hajj pilgrimage. And again, I encourage members to consider what the equivalent for members of different Christian denominations would be if they were suddenly being told they couldn't visit Rome or they couldn't visit the holy places in the Middle East, in Jerusalem and Bethlehem and Nazareth and so on. What kind of a message would that send? And we have to think about how that reality is experienced by the people affected. So, as I say, we are disappointed, deeply disappointed, that the Pakistani government continues to condone and oversee the conduct of religiously motivated attacks.
The excellent report from the International Human Rights Committee and the Asian Human Rights Committee, entitled "Ahmadis in Pakistan Face an Existential Threat," and I would recommend that to anybody here who hasn't read it. It's an excellent report. Ahmadis believe that they are Muslims, and yet in 1974 the National Assembly of Pakistan declared them to be non-Muslims, and this was done by passing the Second Amendment to the Constitution of Pakistan, declaring Ahmadis to be non-Muslim despite their own belief and thought. Pakistan's blasphemy laws remain a key area of concern. These legal provisions, which criminalise insults against Islam, are often misused to settle personal scores, and Ahmadis continue to face blasphemy allegations. Ahmadis cannot defend themselves against charges of blasphemy without committing blasphemy and placing themselves in acute legal, physical and social jeopardy. Ahmadis who voice opposition to legislation making their religion a crime are considered traitors. The International Court of Justice has found systemic and widespread fair trial violations related particularly to Ahmadis accused of blasphemy violations. And under Pakistan's election law, Ahmadis are effectively denied the right to vote, and they are disenfranchised unless they declare themselves as non-Muslims, effectively giving up their faith. The Electoral Commission of Pakistan has decided that Ahmadis can be permitted to vote only under a separate register and by self-identifying as a non-Muslim minority. This requirement to deny their faith in order to vote has caused their disenfranchisement from politics for more than 30 years, And worse still, the separate Ahmadi electoral register is publicly available, making it much easier for extremists to target Ahmadis. The US Commission on International Religious Freedom identifies Pakistan as a country of particular concern, and their 2017 annual report states, and I quote, "Ahmadis are subject to severe legal restrictions and suffer from officially sanctioned discrimination. The Second Amendment declares Ahmadis to be non-Muslims. Penal Code Section 298 makes it criminal for Ahmadis to refer to themselves as Muslims, preach, propagate or disseminate materials on their faith, or refer to their houses of worship as mosques. They are also prohibited from voting. Ahmadis frequently face societal discrimination, harassment and physical attacks, sometimes resulting in murder." And I want to mention here the discrimination faced by Ahmadi women who live in a patriarchal society and, as well as facing similar levels of harassment as Ahmadi men, can become socially isolated, facing overt discrimination during routine activities like shopping or going to the market. Some shops display signs and banners that say, "We do not deal with Qadianis," the pejorative term used to refer to Ahmadi Muslims. Many Ahmadis leave Pakistan to seek refuge elsewhere, seeking a safe haven where they can freely practice their religion and live a normal and peaceful life. Countries like Pakistan, Indonesia, Algeria, Egypt, Burundi and others, in their persecution of Ahmadi Muslims, are denying their citizens that universal right. And yet, Pakistan's founder, Ali Jinnah, expressed a clear commitment to defend religious freedom when he said, and I quote, "You are free. You are free to go to your temples. You are free to go to your mosques or to any other place of worship in this state of Pakistan. You may belong to any religion, caste or creed." And it is time for Pakistan to return to this vision. And it is time for the UK and our international partners to work more effectively and consistently to secure the rights of the Ahmadi community across the world.
This, I think, debate is particularly timely as it comes, as has been pointed out, on the morning after a brutal mob attack on a historic 100-year-old mosque in the Punjab. Let me say, we strongly condemn these continuing attacks on this peaceful community. This attack serves as an unwelcome reminder of the seriousness of the issue, and I have tweeted my own condemnation of the mob attack earlier today.
I don't think any of us should underestimate the power and the importance to the Ahmadi community of a debate of this sort taking place in the British Parliament on the floor of this chamber. It means that they are recognised and they are heard, and they desperately need to be heard.